We recognize that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and remains home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities. We also acknowledge that this land and its original stewards, we recognize the enduring history and resilience of contributions from the Black community in Toronto and across Canada. From those who sought freedom through the Underground Railroad to generations of Black leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, educators, artists, and as well as change makers who will continue to shape our country. Black communities have played a key role in this, essentially building what Canada is today, and have often still continue to face systemic anti-Black racism barriers. At Black North, we recognize that reconciliation and racial equity are interconnected. We are committed to advancing this in a meaningful way of changing by creating pathways for economic prosperity, fostering inclusive leadership, and as well as working alongside Indigenous and Black communities. So just before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Washrooms are directly outside for those that are in the room, if you want to step out. I just also want to just quickly run through what the agenda for today will look like. So we'll have our CEO, Dahabo, come and speak shortly. We'll also have a keynote address, and then we'll be able to walk you guys through in terms of what Pledge 2.0 looks like and how it'll continue to empower the work that we're working on. And without further ado, I want to welcome the leader that has been championing this change for the last 6 years, my CEO, Dahabo Ahmed Omar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you are all doing well. Thank you for being in the room. And I know there's very many of you online as well. And so it is quite incredible for us. I've got a chance to speak to a few of you before walking in. And, you know, it's one of those moments that is very sobering, but also allows us to just situate ourselves on where we are when it comes to the work of equity. I love that this room is full. I know there's very many of you that weren't able to join us here, but it does mark the next chapter of our work. And I do believe, and I hope you agree, that the work that we have taken together 5 years ago was one of the most ambitious corporate movements for equity this country has ever seen. And so on behalf of Black North Initiative, I do want to begin by thanking Deloitte and its Black Action Council and Black Professionals Network for opening their doors and hosting us today, and by thanking our partners at Bain & Co., who have worked alongside us to design what you will see this afternoon. And so if you look around this room and you look online, you will notice that every organization that is here has made a decision 5 years ago. And there are a few of you that have joined us more recently as well to stand up for what you believed counted. You are the leaders who signed the pledge and who are the reason we came together today. And this is one of the most significant corporate commitments in Canadian history. 5 years ago, many of you made a decision that wasn't easy. You chose to publicly commit to action. You chose accountability, because that decision, Canada looks very, very different today. I also do want to recognize members of our board of directors who are with us online, our founder and chairman, Wes Hall, who began this journey, who asked all of you and very many others a very critical question 5 years ago and said, what are you going to do about this work? How will you be accountable? What can you do to make sure that systemic anti-Black racism is dealt with? I also want to welcome Mark Maroney, who is a member of our board, as well as Carrie Thompson. Thank you all for joining us and for your leadership and stewardship, as it's been a big part of this community that we continue to grow. And so today is about what we build together next. 5 years ago, the pledge asked Canadian leaders to acknowledge a truth, to commit to change, and you've done that. The first chapter did exactly that, and it was designed to do that. It was to build awareness, it was to build community, it was to build a foundation of 500 corporate signatories across Canada. And since launching the original pledge, hundreds of organizations have committed publicly. Thousands of leaders have engaged with this work, and together we have helped move equity from the margins into central of our business and our boardrooms. Pledge 2.0 is a deliberate next step in that journey. It builds on everything that we have achieved together over the past 5 years. It is an evolution that our signatories themselves have asked for. You told us that you wanted clear, measurable outcomes. You told us you wanted models of success that fit organizations at different stages of their maturity. You told us you wanted progress to be recognized and celebrated. You also told us that you wanted a structure that was going to be sustainable for the long term. And we listened and we learned and we challenged ourselves. We wanted to build something that was going to respond to all of your needs. And so Pledge 2.0, I believe, is that answer. We built it for you, built it with you and not for you. I also want to name the moment that we are in. In the conversation about diversity and inclusion and equity, it has been contested in every way. Some organizations are pulling back. Our view, and the view supported by the evidence that you will see today, is that this is precisely the wrong time to retreat, because demographics of this country are changing, and that's not for debate. The organizations that will stay the course will hold a decisive advantage in talent, in markets, and in performance. Today's session is designed to answer 4 key questions. The first one being, why Pledge 2.0? 2 being, why is the time still now to do the work of equity? What does participation actually look like? How do we continue to build momentum together? And we will close with your questions, because this is a conversation and not a presentation. Later today, we will look at what Canada will look like by 2041. The demographic shifts already underway, and the business case that numbers is a future employee, future entrepreneur, future customer, future leader. And the conclusion they point to is unavoidable. This is not a values conversation. It is a strategy conversation. The question in front of every organization in the room and online is whether you will be positioned to win that future. And Pledge 2.0 is hopefully the vehicle we have built together to make sure that answer is yes. Many of you also sent us questions, very important questions, and we've read each and every one of them. And what you've asked us to do is, what tangible supports exist behind the pledge? Do you have a dedicated team? What is a maturity assessment? What will benchmarking look like against peer community organizations that come with signing? You asked us how the Pledge 2.0 adapts to different kinds of organizations, from law firms with their own dedicated pledge to public sector bodies where the corporate model does not fit. And I'll tell you, I had an incredible chat with the Deloitte team this morning. And one of the things that they asked me was, what would you like today to be about? And I was really, really honest. And I said, I'd like people to measure their efforts. You may be doing a lot, and I'm sure that you are. But what I hope happens after this is that you start to focus on 1 or 2 things that are going to be incredibly impactful. And so the question that we keep asking ourselves very genuinely is, what has changed in the past 5.5, 6 years? And I will say this very plainly. We do not need another murder. We do not need another George Floyd. We've never needed that, in fact. And so because Canada is entering the most demanding and challenging era in our history, global competition, economic pressure, social division are testing this country in ways we have not seen in generations. Our diversity is the single greatest asset that Canada has. And I will be honest, and for those of you that know me, I say it like it is. We have to figure this out. We have to take full advantage of the talent that we have in this country. We have to draw on that talent, the perspectives, and the ambition of every community in this country. And we will build a stronger Canada, a more competitive Canada, and a more united Canada. That is the opportunity that we have in front of us, and it is bigger than one organization. Pledge 2.0 is an opportunity to seize what could be. And so I imagine what the next 5 years are going to look like, or what 5 years from now will look like, when organizations across Canada are no longer asking where to begin, but instead competing to become leaders in inclusive excellence. That is the future we are building together. To take us into that journey itself, I'm delighted to hand over to Kika Ojo-Thompson, the Principal Advisor at MJY Advisory. Kika is a friend, a pioneer, and someone who spent 28 years working with leaders across sectors on equity-informed talent and business strategy, performance, governance, leadership development. She's going to speak to you about the question that is at the heart of this conversation today. Why the time is still now to do the work of equity. The future won't be defined by the organizations that waited. It will be defined by the organizations that acted. And so thank you, Kika, for continuing to lead us in this conversation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Grateful for the opportunity to bring voice to all of the important things that Dahabo just outlined. We're at such a critical time. I'm Kika Ojo-Thompson. I use the pronouns she and her, and I am now the Principal Advisor at MJY Advisory. Very proud to be in relationship with Dahabo in particular, but also with BlackNorth in general, in partnership and relationship, because we believe in the same things. And what Dahabo last said about Canada is exactly that. Like, as a Canadian, I'm really hopeful, and I believe in what's possible here. And that's why I do the work that I do every day. Just a couple of things to kind of position myself in this conversation and in this building today. As Dahabo said, it's been 28 years of helping organizations figure this work out in the public and private sector. Excuse me, I also spent a lot of time inside of institutions. So the perspective I bring as a consultant is as someone that has had to live with and work within the constraints and possibilities of organizational life, as well as a consultant, so having sort of purview and perspective. And that purview and perspective and the sort of thoughtfulness about proximity is the place from which we set up MJY Advisory, sort of having an outside entity to provide support and provide that proximity to the issues, that point of view that is more difficult to have when you're on the inside looking out, and easier to see when you're on the outside looking in or looking over. And so sort of collapsing 28 years, collapsing, founding of my first company, building that over two decades, and sort of Big Four partnership. So it's really good to be back here. So I was a partner at Deloitte for a time, and so really wonderful to be back in the building. But then coming out to build something where I'm using that proximity and that perspective to really support clients. So that's that. We're not going to spend much more time on that. I wanna actually, let me do some more thank yous. Can we go to the next slide, please? I want to just acknowledge and thank BlackNorth for this commitment that they've established for Canada and for corporate Canada and beyond. So we know that corporate is just one of the spaces that we support, that BlackNorth supports or invites into this work. And we need that. We need that, what's the right word? We need that call to action. And we need it by an entity that has some power, clout, and sort of capacity. And so really grateful to BlackNorth for that. Thank you to the team. Thank you, Wes Hall, Shelton, Dahabo, obviously the entire team and the board. Hello. So why is the time still now, right? And what the opportunity is for us today and what we can do now. And I want to acknowledge that there there's sort of diversity in the room. And what I mean by that is there's public sector, there's private sector, and there's organizations that are well on their way with this work that have seen tangible impact and benefit, and there are organizations that are just starting. And my job was to speak to all of you today. So you're going to kind of see that I'm trying to capture the entire room with one message. So I'll go to the next slide. So I believe that this work right now, or the work that we need to be focused on, is really, people, power, and performance. So, this work, equity work, is not going to be sustained if the organizations that are committing to it are not seeing profit margins, productivity, and impact, right? So there's work to do right at the intersection of people, power, and performance. And, the reason that the word power is there, and it's really critical to the work I'm doing right now, is that we've got to figure out the power relations piece. So we've gotten to a point in the country where most organizations have the diversity. Like if you walk into the building and look around, you're just from entering today on the first floor, coming up the elevator, I'm sure you even just glancing around inside of Deloitte, for example, you noticed there's diversity here, right? That's what the last several decades have gotten us, and that's good. But in a way, the work just begins because it is now that those spaces are diverse that we need to be asking critical questions about outcomes, impact, and experiences. So who is experiencing what in our organizations? And for example, when we look sort of from the entry points of our organizations up into the C-suite, what do we see? What changes and what stays the same, right? So who's there? Who do we see when we get to C-suite that is not represented in terms of who we see at the front line? And that's one of the indicators or one of the proof points or KPIs around how we're doing. So we've gotten the diverse bodies in the building in most cases, not everywhere. But the question is, how are the power relations going and how are we managing the power relations? Because that's the sweet spot for us in Canada. And so I will take the next slide, please. This is an interesting time because we get, and I know that the Black North staff have affirmed this, and I've spoken to I spent a lot of time speaking to other consultants, and everyone's confirming that there is a narrative. It's not the only narrative, but one pretty significant narrative is that we can move on now. And I'm talking about from anti-Black racism in particular. We can move on, and so it's we've spent enough time on that. We've spent some money. We have some Black folks in our organizations. We've set up an ERG. It's time to focus on something else. Anybody ever heard that kind of narrative in your organization before? So just for folks online, and hello, folks online, there's some nods in the room saying, yeah, we've been hearing that narrative, and this is familiar. And so there's this effort to kind of take the foot off the gas or move on because we've arrived. And the arrival is simply the activities, by the way. This notion of having arrived is simply a list of activities that we've got. Like we have an ERG, they're acknowledging Black History Month. We might have a speaker series. Caravana's coming in Toronto soon. We'll have a little Caravana thing. We'll allow for some jerk chicken and rice and peas in the eatery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that all goes on the list in relation to the response to anti-Black racism. And yet, and still, and most of these points come from some data points that you will see in the presentations after my talk, and also in Black North's research, which is that anti-Black racism in the workplace persists in some really significant and dire ways. And so, for example, but this is far from a limited list, from a complete list, excuse me, Black Canadians are less likely to succeed in the job hiring process. Now, when we offer data points like this, you can account for things like, well, did they have the same education? Did they have the same experiences, school, quality, et cetera? When the research spits out data points like this, it's saying we've accounted for all those other things okay, so that's one. Black employees experience lower levels of career progression and integration. This is the experience of Black folks. The Black unemployment rate in Canada is 4 points higher than the rate of white Canadians. Nearly half of the Black employees in Canada report facing discrimination when it comes to promotions, hiring, or pay. And that's just what they're reporting back. That's not the same thing as whether it's happening more or less than that, right? And this last one, I just felt so strongly about it, and it wasn't from the Black North research, but I wanted to add it, which is Black Canadians make up 5.4% of the labor force, but hold only 1% of senior executive roles. Okay, and that's 2026 data. So how is it that these data points exist and persist, and we're hearing a narrative, and I would say increasingly so, of being past this? Like, we've done enough. It's time to move on. Let's do something else, right? Let's pick something else. And I want to assert that, actually, no, let me do one more slide. Let me go to the next slide, please. I want to, so in relation to the fact that anti-Black racism persists, the cost, and I'm not talking, this is not even sort of speaking directly to the dollars and cents cost, right? But you can extrapolate, right? So when psychological health and safety is low, recruitment and retention are low, engagement scores are low, and mental health issues in the organization are high, there is a profit impact productivity issue, right, in the organization. And so when we talk about the anti-Black racism persisting, the so what is at least these four things. Okay, so the so what is that it means that the psychological health and safety for Black employees, and I would argue everyone else who's observing these phenomena, right? Like, it's not just the Black employees, but sort of there's like an observation or a realization going on for others that is impacting them as well. We see the psychological health and safety numbers go down for the organization. Recruitment retention is much more difficult. And again, in terms of the dollars and cents, it takes 3 months on average for the average corporation, to onboard a new staffer. 3 months. That's a productivity issue. So this constant sort of hamster wheel or revolving door of great talent going in and out of the organization equals profits lost. Engagement scores, Gallup, Gallup, the researching hub, they make it very clear that engagement scores are directly correlated to profit margins. And lastly, mental health. So when I say just mental health like that, what I'm saying is that mental health distress in relation to things like systemic racism are high, and those are directly costs to any organization via benefits, et cetera. Okay, so there's a cost to this. So we're realizing a cost. We're living this right now as organizations and corporations across Canada. We're realizing a true dollars and cents cost, and we're seeing data. The data is evident all around us around what Black folks are experiencing in corporate Canada. And when I say corporate, I mean corporate, public sector, and nonprofit, okay, for now. So how could all of these things be happening? How could we be seeing those data points, experiencing these outcomes or these sort of corporate realities, and be saying, we're done with this now? Okay, and that brings us to how we started. I'm going to ask for the next slide, please. So I want to bring us back to how this work got started. When I say this work got started, I want to acknowledge all the people here who represent, and online, who represent organizations that have been on this journey for decades. Those exist in Canada, right? There are many, many organizations that were on this journey before George Floyd. Does that resonate for folks? Okay, I know some of them, I've worked with and for some of them, right? However, the majority and the upswing that I think we all experienced, remember Black squares on social media and stuff like that, right? We experienced a sort of upswing and this sort of normalization of the topic, and sort of you could now definitely walk into just about every entity and there's some sort of work or commitment to this. Is that fair? Like, you saw the upswing. The problem was that the premise upon which the work began was flawed. So what do I mean, right? And Dahabo referenced, we don't need another murder, right? So let's start with that. I know for the organization that I founded and ran for about 25 years, Kojo Institute, that we got a sort of an uptick in calls in that era, post George Floyd, and the call would go something like, "Hi, we need a DEI." That's word for word, by the way. Quote, "We need a DEI." And so then we would ask our very classic question: what problem are you trying to solve in your organization, right? Well, George Floyd was murdered. Absolutely. But what problem are you trying to solve in your organization? You following me, right? This sort of disconnected, George Floyd was murdered, so we now have to act, which is lovely. We're not saying ignore George Floyd's murder. No one is saying that, right? But what we are saying is that this sort of detachment and this sort of disconnected list of tasks and activities in the name of DEI is disconnected from the organization itself. And when you do that, you put the work at risk, and the effort at risk of, as random as the beginning would be, is as easily random as the sort of discontinuing. Does this make sense? Right? This is what we're facing right now. We're facing you know what, it's time to stop because, well, why? Because we've done it already. We've been doing it. In the face of all the data and evidence that I just outlined, we're randomly saying it's time to stop, right? Because we've been doing it. But what have we been doing? And in response to what? What problem have we been trying to solve, right? And so what I'd like to offer as a solution is that we needed to be taking an equity-informed approach to what we've called DEI. And just to be very clear, it took me a long time to start using the phrase DEI or the acronym. A long time. I'm old school. Like, this work is like what my graduate work has been about, et cetera. And it's equity work. But I understand that this is how we're speaking about it today. And so I'm saying that we can approach it with an equity-informed we can utilize an equity-informed approach to this work, and that is, I'm going to ask for a slide, please. So, and this again, going back to sort of we need a DEI, right? This is getting to the heart of the problem. There was not an establishment in the first place of what the disproportionalities and disparities were inside of the entities that we're calling. So they had no idea excuse me, what the challenges were in their organizations in relation to what the data said. I'm not asking you to guess, right? And to be very clear, data is also qualitative. So what you're hearing from Black staff and from those who are working with and around and for and in allyship of is as important as what the quantitative data says. Right? But the data is there to be farmed and to be collected, analyzed, and utilized in decision making and in determining what your problems are, what your challenges are, what your issues are, and thus what you can do about them. Okay, so the lack of clarity through which corporate Canada and beyond took the work up has really put us in this position today, because it's typically a list of activities not related to the entities that we found disproportionalities and disparities about, just busyness. So, feels good. It does sort of, melt the tip of the iceberg. Don't get me wrong. It does help with sort of the cultural texture of the organization to have the Black History Month celebration, et cetera. But the question is, who's experiencing what? And we can have an open book about, what issues we want to address. So when we do equity work, an equity-informed approach to DEI, we discover what issues are going on. And if you did that work today, you would still find the data points that I showed you about Black folks. So the time has absolutely not shifted. The issues are just as poignant. And the question is, how do we do the work then? So if the data is going to show us that Black folks are disproportionately impacted and experiencing disparities, what are we to do? I'm going to ask for the next slide, please. And so one of the first things I want to do, and I kind of sort of spoke about the language a little bit. I see. So some stuff got cut off from the bottom. That's interesting. Apologies. So what you have here is what I call an equity continuum. And so in addressing something like anti-Black racism, but really any issue, any equity like any identity then or any issue, noting that so the left where it says multiculturalism is minimal disruption or minimal impact, all the way to the far, you're right, anti-colonialism, anti-racism, anti-oppression, anti-Black racism. Those are framework options to get us to equity. So equity and like the collapsing of DEI as language has been, I think, really confusing for corporate Canada. Equity is the point. Getting to the identifying and addressing of the disproportionalities and disparities that persist for different groups and communities is the point. But how you get there is defined by who and what, like who's impacted and what you're seeing, right? And so maximum impact in terms of creating equity or creating a neutral sort of experience are what I call the antis over here. Again, another hat tip to Black North for being very clear that the work we need to do is on anti-Black racism. Can I get one more slide, please? Or it's a couple more. Thank you. So I wanted to give you a framework option just so that you could see kind of something in action just to hold on to, okay? Doesn't mean it's the only one, doesn't mean it's appropriate for your organization. That would come in discussion. But with the minute or so that I have left, I want to just share with you, a framework example. And this was something that I developed maybe 10 years ago now, that was really a response to what I was seeing in organizations, which is sort of doing the top two, a tango at the top. We'll maybe make a policy and then do a bunch of training, and then we'll say we've done the equity work. But the third through fifth step are really critical to really seeing significant change. So this is going to be a click each time. So hit me with the first one. So policies, procedures, and proclamations make up the first P. So it's supposed to be like a play on words, peak of the mountain, peak interest. Okay, that's what I know, maybe a little goofy, but I think it works. So what to do and what is expected is what the policy will tell you, right? That's how we use policies, proclamations, and we build procedures around that. Can I have the second one, please? Education, training and professional development to support said policy, not random training over there that just because a Black person's doing it, but but training or professional development that is actually going to support your policy distinctions. Establish targets is the second E, third letter. Establishing performance goals and indicators, that's your KPIs. So what did the data tell you was going on in the organization? Developing your plan and strategy in relation to what the data told you. Can I get the third E, please? Evaluation. The only way to know how you're doing is if you're monitoring, tracking, evaluating, and reporting in your organization. So really think, that's usually where there's an absolute no, we don't do that, right? So really think about, is that what you're doing? And lastly, correction. So we take all of that and we correct, pivot, tweak, but also through accountability frameworks, but also through reward. Who's being rewarded and how? What are you incentivizing in your organization that's going to cause more of the same? Can I get my last two slides, please? So how will you know it's working? Your data will tell your story. Your data will shift. But here's the one most people don't expect. Your issues will increase before they decrease. You'll be like, Kika, what? This happened, then this happened. Yes, your issues will increase before they decrease because now people know where you stand, they know what's coming or what to expect, and they feel safe and protected. Your KPIs will trend upward. There's wins here. And lastly, retention and succession will trend upward. And what I mean by that is you'll keep your people, and you will, and you'll hear the kind of good news from within the organization. And truly, my last slide, I promise. Okay, so in terms of steps, and sorry about the rushing. What you can do now, I want to again acknowledge there's different levels in the room, and we know that. But whoever you decide to get support with in terms of your commitment to this work, because of the good work that Black North has done, is that you need an entity that will be inquisitive about you, that will be curious, not bringing you a boxed, like, this is all I'm selling, so buy this, right? They need to be curious about your organization. They need to assess, like, get to the root causes of the issues. You should be getting that feedback back, equipping your organization to address what they see, and you should be working with someone that will help you sustain what you build. And so through incentivism and other sort of accountability programming. And I think that might be my last slide. That's mine, but go to the next one, please, as I think okay. And so this is the good news. When organizations Canada's demographic reality is really calling us to do this. This is, sort of bringing us back into the flow of the conversation. We know that 1 in 4 Canadians is an immigrant, and that's only going to increase. Say, we think 1 in 3 by 2041. I think Dahabo went through most of these, right? Okay, Black Canadians will be the second largest racialized group in Canada by 2041. Okay, that 2 in 5 Canadians will belong to a racialized group by 2041, right? Up to 47% of the working age talent pool. We know that over 39% of people are more likely to, of organizations are more likely to outperform on profitability that are committed to this work. We know there's at least 19% higher innovation and innovation revenue with above average leadership having diversity in organizations, and that organizations are 2 times more likely to meet or exceed their financial targets for doing this work. The time is still now. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Kike. That was such a powerful reminder of why this work is so important. And I think, Kike laid it out very well in terms of why we still continue need to do the work. And I have the proud honor to welcoming a really great partner. I call him a friend now, who's been a true ally in this work. I just want to really thank him for not only his leadership, but his support and as well as true allyship. So I want to introduce Dan Manicum, partner at Bain & Capital.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Kike. Those are excellent. Just setting the stage, it was very powerful to hear that message. Thanks also to Deloitte, my friends, for the hospitality today. Just by way of quick intro, I'm a partner in our Toronto office. My client work spans a couple of areas. I actually have a practice in the energy and natural resources space, which is, of course, not why I'm here today. I also work quite actively in Bain's diversity, equity, and inclusion practice. So I do that work with our clients. I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion for Bain Canada, which now includes our Toronto and Montreal office. And I also co-lead Bain's pro bono relationship with Dahabo, Shelton, and the Black North team, which is something we've been doing since about January of 2021 or so. And it's been a truly just incredible work that we've done together, and a great experience for all of us. So thanks so much for having me. I'm going to talk a bit about driving change in organizations, how I think about that, which is something we do a lot at Bain. I'm also going to talk a lot about the design of Pledge 2.0. We were fortunate enough to work with the team a year or so ago to assess Pledge, what we'll now call Pledge 1.0, and talk about how we might improve it in Pledge 2.0, which is what we'll go through today. I just want to acknowledge for a second that change is hard. People have to change, organizations have to change. When we think about that, I would argue that most folks and most companies go through an arc that looks something like you see on the slide. There's like an awareness moment, then trying to understand what you're trying to do. But you have to get pretty far up the curve before any individual is going to actually go and come into work and do something differently every day. And so when we think about mobilizing change in organization, we think about this curve, bringing the whole company up that curve, and also acknowledging that different people in the organization are going to be at different moments of this curve at any given point in time and any given topic. I'll acknowledge, by the way, that I'm speaking to a room of practitioners, and so I'm aware that everyone here is very far up the curve, but also organizations may or may not be in different pockets. The other thing I would just say is that change takes a long time. Did it go? There we go. Even positive change is viewed, can be very challenging to mobilize an organization, right? There's this moment where there's this big upswing of excitement and enthusiasm and all the potential that this change could bring for all of us. But then all of a sudden it becomes very hard, and we are at risk of people opting out, is what can happen quite commonly on any change that is even viewed positively by the organization. These moments, which we actually call the Valley of Despair, is when we get sort of folks enrolled. Everyone's really excited about all the work to go and do, and then the initiative overload hits, and everyone's got these big accountabilities, these big ideas, and then the impact is maybe slower than we hoped it might be, and then we are at risk of opting out, right? People saying this is too tough, maybe we should settle, right? Maybe our goals were too ambitious and we could do something a little bit different. We see this up and down organizational change across every single category of change you could possibly think about, not just DEI, but frankly, any transformation in an organization. And so when we thought about designing Pledge 2.0, we asked ourselves the question, what are the building blocks that will drive lasting change? How do we help people think about what they should be doing on an ongoing basis in a way that is sustainable to bring the full organization along with them? Let's see if that worked. So what are those building blocks? I'm a consultant, so I brought a framework, but this is also just a helpful way to think about what are all the things that we should be doing. And this ties quite directly through to what you'll see in Pledge 2.0 in terms of the specific actions that we put in there. I would suggest that it starts with some kind of an aspiration, right? That can be a goal for your organization, a multi-year ambition, in this case, a DEI ambition, whatever that might look like, with specific goals and metrics and a time frame. You also need sustained leadership commitment. We need people at the top enrolled in this. We need people all the way down through the organization enrolled in the ambition. And I would assert that what we need, and I'll refer back to what Kika was talking about, is that the business case here is actually quite clear, as she was just talking about. And so what this aspiration needs to include is a very strong conviction on what the role is of diversity, equity, inclusion in your strategy and in the outcomes you're trying to deliver. And if you have that conviction as an enterprise, it'll be much easier to drive this type of change through the organization, because it's tied to your overall ambition. If we think about the levers we're gonna address, we think about things what we call inside the four walls, so inside your company, and then outside your four walls on the right-hand side. Inside the four walls, thinking about the talent journey. Kika talked about the front door to the CEO, right? And thinking about the pipeline of talent that goes through there and how it evolves. So when we think about levers to pull in designing an equitable talent journey, we're thinking about looking at every single decision point along that talent pipeline, right? So recruiting, and actually even ahead of recruiting, where do we go to recruit? Like, how do we broaden the pipeline? Recruiting, hiring, onboarding, development, advancement, performance recognition, promotion, all of those stages through the organization. And then secondly, how do we build an inclusive organization to help people thrive, right? We know from neuroscience that inclusion is very damaging to people. It compromises their ability to show up at work as their full and complete selves, and it adversely affects their ability to focus, to problem solve, and to interact constructively at work. And so if we can design an inclusive organization that motivates, that trains people on and motivates the right behaviors, the right leadership mindsets, the right peer mindsets, that solidifies that with the right sets of structures, systems, and processes, and the right sets of meetings and cultural norms you establish in the organization. We think about outside the company, we're thinking about things like your brand, your products, your customer experience, thinking about diversifying your supplier base and recognizing what the community partnerships should be as part of your overall diversity mission, and thinking about organizations like BlackNorth and others. And then, of course, we have enablers on there, thinking about the right governance. So do you have the right DEI structures in your company? Do they have the right links to the right executives? Are they resourced properly? Do you have employee engagement mechanisms in place? And also, are you able to collect the right data to assess your progress, and the right technology to do that? And so we'll talk in a minute about what's in Pledge 2.0, but you'll see a lot of what's on here is reflected in some of the actions that are part of the maturity assessment that you'll see in the pledge. So as I mentioned, we did go back and look at Pledge 1.0 and say, what do we think about that? And I think the original pledge was by and large a big success and drove huge visibility for this work, and also drove huge impact in many of your organizations. It was very ambitious. It acknowledged the need for BlackNorth. It got a lot of buy-in for BlackNorth and for the pledge itself, and it gave guidance on principles. There were some areas where we felt it could have done more. Not to say necessarily that it should have done more at the time, given where we were in the journey. But if you think about now and the need to be maybe more pragmatic and practical about what work needs to be done, we would have liked to see maybe more clearer actions, and you've asked for this in your feedback, right? Like clear actions, measurable actions, how do we define success, and clarity around financial commitment. And so we'll go through this, but what you'll see is Pledge 2.0 is focused on being more measurable. So there's clear outcomes to measure, and there's also, you can report progress in terms of your maturity and the actions you're undertaking. It should come across as achievable. We've provided different models. First of all, different models to engage in the pledge at all, and also different models of success depending on on your organization. There's a celebratory aspect, so we'll be reporting and celebrating your progress, so you can highlight your achievements. And it's sustainable, which is to say that there is a financial commitment, a small financial commitment among signatories, which supports the resourcing of BlackNorth is required to properly support all of you. So I'll hit the three major pieces of Pledge 2.0, and then I'll pass over to Shelton to go over these in more detail. So we just talk about three aspects. One is there are multiple ways to participate. Okay, so every organization, whether you are a signatory or not, will have the ability to support BlackNorth and participate in some way. And you can define that collaboration mechanism in your one-on-one discussions with Shelton and the BlackNorth team. We will have reporting signatories, non-reporting signatories, which we'll explain in a minute, donors, and program sponsors. Amongst signatories, this is now columns 2 and 3, there is a measurable action portion and there is an outcome portion. Kika talked about activities, and of course, activities are not sufficient, but if we think about assessing DEI maturity, this is the actions or sort of the inputs to doing the right work, and then the outcomes would be the results. So we've developed specific actions across 5 categories. You'll notice these rhyme with what I was saying earlier. So do you have DEI strategy and governance in place? Do you have activities in place to build inclusive cultures? Do you have equitable talent practices? Do you have diverse external engagement? And are you making a financial commitment? Effectively, what's behind those actions is at Bain, when we advise on this work, we have a DEI maturity assessment that we use with our clients. And so effectively, this is a version of that. And there is a handful of specific activities between each one of those 5 boxes and a four-step sort of maturity view of, are you doing this, this, or this, or this? And that will be a way to measure yourself on your overall maturity, and also a way to benchmark yourself versus others, which Shelton will go through. Then there's outcome metrics, and so this is should be the result of that work. We'll invite you to define your outcome metrics working with the BlackNorth team. We'd suggest things like Black representation in the workforce, Black representation in supplier and vendor base, and your financial contribution. But again, that'll be part of your discussions with Shelton and the team. So that's the high-level view of Pledge 2.0. I'm going to throw to Shelton now to talk more about what that'll look like in practice. Did it go? Yeah. Awesome.
Hey, thank you so much, Dan. That was amazing. So now I have the proud pleasure of walking you guys through what Pledge 2.0 will look like. So a few key things you've heard from Dahabo, you've heard from Dan, you've heard from Kike, in regards that we deliberately spent quite a lot of time listening to a lot of the signatories, finding out what are some of the pain points, what are some of the things that we need to tweak and improve the pledge going forward for the next 5 years. So that's the approach that we've taken. Okay. So in terms of inviting organizations to sign up a pledge, there's one objective. So the pledge really guides us through the next 5 years in terms of being able to continue to build equitable workspaces and includes the workspace over the next 5 years. We just have 2 simple asks in terms of the signatories, that you continue to work with the BlackNorth team to personalize a set of goals and action plans, and then as well as to complete your pledge assessments. Our commitment on our end is to continue to provide you guys with the D&I support and expertise. We will share your progress reports and industry benchmarks, and then public recognition for the amazing work that a lot of organizations have been doing. I think it's one of the things that we haven't really celebrated enough. And with Pledge 2.0, we'll be able to really celebrate, but also showcase that this work is possible and how empowering it is when it's done the right way. Next slide, please. So as Dan mentioned, this is something that is new. Initially, with all signatories, we just had one pathway, and which was just a reporting signatory. But after speaking to quite a lot of signatories, we found that some signatories want to do the work and remain reporting signatories. There are some signatories that are going to be non-reporting signatories, and what non-reporting signatories basically is you will continue to do the work. However, you will not need to do any assessments with us or any baselining with us. However, we still require you guys to submit proof that you're actually doing the work. So anything from an ESG report, an impact report, to actually showcase that the work is still being done within your organization. And then the other two pathways, of course, is being a donor to support the mandate and the work that we do, and as well as being a sponsor of one of the programs that we have, anything from Black North Begin, which supports Black entrepreneurs, to Black North Connect, which is a platform essentially for jobs, mentorship, and as well as bursaries, and as well as our Vanguard program that we launched this month, which is a program that takes high-achieving Black youth from all across the country on a 6-week intensive math, English, writing, I would say, academy. But the beautiful thing about it as well is we start at grade 11, and we'll walk with these kids for the next 6 years to make sure that they not only get mentorship, but they also are able to continue to have networks built within our signatory base as well. And the last program that we're also working on currently is our Home Ownership Bridge program, which is our biggest program, I would say, outside of the Vanguard program. And this program helps us provide homes for Black families. To date, we have about 14 families that we have situated right now, and we're looking to scale it to about 60 families this year. So it is 66, I stand corrected. So imagine the impact on 66 families. People that never thought they'd have the opportunity to actually be homeowners, especially in this economy that we have right now. So it's going to be really tremendous to see not only these families build stability, but also build generational wealth for their families. Next slide, please. Okay, so on this slide, we basically just go through what Dan had mentioned. Is there is going to be membership fees for the work to support the work that we're doing. As you can imagine, for the last 5 years, Black North has not charged a single cent for the amount of work that we've done to not only provide supports, but this will also allow us to have a dedicated team to support you with the work for the next 5 years. So how we basically tiered it, on the left, you'll see that there's corporate signatory rates for reporting and non-reporting. And then on the right-hand side, you have rates that are going to be for the nonprofit organizations as well. For the corporate signatories, your bands are around revenue. And then for the nonprofits, it's based on the size of your staff. What are some of the benefits that you get from this? So as a reporting signatory, you will get access to Pledge 2.0 reporting, D&I process, help from our team in terms of understanding where you are. We'll work with your team as well to set goals. And the unique thing as well with Pledge 2.0, which we'll go into in a bit more detail, is we can really customize the pledge goals dependent on what are some of the key drivers for your organizations within the next 5 years. Unlike the first pledge where you just had 7 items that you had to do. So now we are giving the power to organizations to also really focus in on what are the key drivers for your organizations for the next 5 years. As I said, we're going to have a dedicated team that's going to help you support. You're going to have inclusive access to our executive summit. I'm sure a few of you were there last year. We'll continue to have one again this year to continue the conversation around diversity and inclusion, especially at the C-suite level, to make sure that you guys also have buy-in, because we've heard from a lot of people doing the inclusion work in terms of how challenging it is. So having that executive leadership definitely does help in terms of not only supporting you in terms of the decisions, but also providing you with the supports, the budgets that you may need in some cases to execute on some of the projects that you're working on. The other things that we're also going to be providing is additional benefits are 20% discount on Black North Connect, which is a platform that you can use for recruiting. So we have about 2,000 youth professionals and senior professionals that are currently on the platform looking for opportunities. And as well as I said, a platform that your staff as well can use to either gain mentors or use to get mentorship from as well. So if anyone from your organization would like to volunteer, they have the opportunity to volunteer and become a mentor. You'll also get 5% discount on BSA Executive Search, which is a search company that we have partnered with that will provide you guys with a discount for your executive search. And we'll continue to add additional supports as we continue to grow the platform. You also get invitation to our career fair, and you also get invitations to Black North events, and then as well early access to our gala packages and tickets. Next slide, please. Okay, so in regards to program sponsorship, so we have the following tiers for the following programs. So Black North Begin, as I said, is a platform that supports Black entrepreneurs with resources, mentorship, fundraising opportunities, and business tools that they need to grow, scale, and sustain their businesses. And then we have that tiered approach from 10,000 all the way to 35,000 in terms of being able to support. In terms of Black North Connect, it connects Black talents with career opportunities, mentorship, scholarships, bursaries, and resources. And we also have tiers for that as well. Home ownership, which is our program that supports Black families to build knowledge, confidence, and financial readiness as they prepare to be homeowners, and as well as just being a regular donor to an organization as well. Next slide, please. Measurement, the fun stuff. So one of the things that we've radically changed with our measurement and our assessment is with our last, I would say, couple of pledges, we had about 76 questions. So it was a really intense, really extensive survey. However, I'm happy to announce that we're scaling those down to 20 questions, which will be focused on the key areas that Dan had mentioned earlier. So this would be a typical example of one of the questions. So around D&I and governance, we would then ask you a set of questions. Have you established an executive sponsorship commitment? And you would have radio buttons where you would indicate yes or no. And we'd also ask you, how far have you gotten in regards to that particular item? Are you developing? Are you evolving? Are you advancing? Or are you leading? And then we would be able to, after the assessment is done, we would be able to then benchmark where you would individually stand against other peers within the same industry. And you'd know individually what areas or what key focuses or what areas that other organizations within the same industry are maybe leading, and where you would need to do a little bit more work in terms of being able to, I won't say really catch up, but also I would say lead, because we want to be very competitive as well. And I know a lot of corporate companies are very competitive in certain areas. We'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, and then in terms of outcome matrix, so these are the key items that we will be tracking. So in terms of outcome matrix, so long-term success will be measured using outcome matrix. Ultimately, the goals achieved can be measured on the following KPIs. So the X amount of representation within your company, the X amount percentage of Black representation within your executive board, your X amount of representation between your board of directors, X amount of representation in terms of your supplier and vendors, and as well as the X amount given to a Black focused organization. And I'll quickly just note as well is for some organizations, you will only be responsible for the first four because all of you signed different pledges. There's some nonprofit organizations that will not be measured against the financial commitments. So I'll just mention that there. And then in terms of tracking, so you will work with our team to determine what outcomes or metrics best measure the impact that you're working against. We will ensure that, of course, that due to sensitivity and D&I data regulations, that whatever information that you do share with us remains private. Any information that is shared will only be disaggregated data, so no organizations would be called out. Our intent is really to work collaboratively with you guys because we know that this work is not only to improve the sustainability of your organizations as well, and for Canada, but also to really move this work along. So we want to work collaboratively with you. At a minimum, what do we expect from you guys? So we, at a minimum, expect that you report on the percentage of Black representation within your company, the percentage of Black representation within your executive roles, and then as well as donations focused at Black focused organizations. Next slide, please. In terms of the work and how we'd work with you, so initially you would come in year one, would do a baseline assessment to find out where exactly you stand. After that baseline assessment is done, we would then set up a secondary meeting where we would walk through some of the survey feedback from your baseline assessment and then work together on a plan for the next 5 years. Within those 5 years, we would have 1 or 2 check-ins per year to just find out where exactly you are, what supports you need, how far, what are the pain points that you're still facing? Can we provide additional supports? And then the next assessment that you do would be in year 3. So once again, year 3 would send you a survey to find out what is the progress that you've had over the last 3 years. What are some areas that you've completed? What are some areas that you're still needing additional supports? And then year 5 is when you would do your last final assessment. And this would be the assessment of the full 5 years in terms of where you've been able to get to since year 1 all the way until year 5. Next slide, please. Roles and responsibility, the fun stuff. Okay, so in terms of responsibilities for the signatories, conducting an assessment to determine your internal capabilities and current standing against the pledge actions, being able to select specific actions that you want to drive towards and develop over the next 5 years, tracking progress, of course, against the pledge goals that you've set, being able to flag areas where supports are needed, and then being able to conduct self-assessments with the BlackNode team to set your goals for the next 5 years, and completing the final year assessment that will be in year 5 and reporting that to the BlackNode team. And then we also want to hear feedback from you guys. What are some of the things that we can do better, or what are some of the areas where you need additional supports and where we could provide that supports for you? In terms of our commitment to you, we will continue to not only communicate the pledge objectives to you, to ensure that you have the right tools and resources. We will continue to support you with D&I support, refine your pledge actions, and finalize your pledge goals. We'll discuss your progress and provide you with supports as needed. We'll collect the data, we'll analyze it, we'll conduct interviews with you for feedback, we'll share progress and reports and benchmarks. And then lastly, in terms of recognition, we want to publicly recognize signatories that have demonstrated significant actions and leadership on building inclusive and equitable workplaces. And then, as I said earlier, making sure that all the data is aggregated and updated and shared publicly so that we can celebrate you guys as well. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of next steps to finalize the pledge, so you would work with us to set up a date where you can submit your baseline assessment. We would then reach out to you. So keep out an eye. I think a few emails have already been sent out to a few signatories. And then in terms of being able to partner with us, or if you prefer, other ways of working with us, whether as a donor or program sponsor, you can also email us at pledge@blacknode.ca. And we will continue to not only provide you guys with supports, but we're really looking forward to having this launched. We're excited because this is not only a new beginning, but this is also a new beginning for what the future of Canada look like. As we saw earlier, the demographics of this country are changing. We're in a very difficult climate, I think, worldwide, but Canada is very much different from any other nation, whether it's from the South or other nations in Europe, in terms of the amount of immigrants that we have in our country. 1 in 4, can you imagine? And by 2041, that's going to be 2 in 5. So this is something that organizations really need to be mindful of, and as well as also noticing that this is actually a way for you to boost your productivity within your organization, boost your innovation within your organization. This isn't something that's just a nice to have, but this actually makes business sense. So we're really excited for the next step, and I'll open the floor up for any questions that people have. There is a mic. Yeah.
Is it the membership monthly or yearly
So it is an annual fee.
annual fee?
Yes. Thank you, Ryan. Candice, I see your hand up online. If you could kindly unmute yourself. Well, wait for Candice. Does anyone else in the room have any questions? Okay.
I have a question about data. Considering, unlike the US, where you're legally mandated to report on race-based data, I think just across the board, race-based data isn't necessarily as accessible because of the fact that it's not legally mandated. So I'm just wondering, with the emphasis that you have placed on data and the challenges that currently exist in the Canadian market with data, what are the ways that you will be addressing that challenge? Because not all organizations have the level of data that your pledge is requiring.
Great question, and thank you for that. So firstly, what I would start off is with, as I mentioned earlier, we're scaling down from 76 questions initially from what we were doing in the last 4 years, because we heard that exact same issue. So we're now focused on those 5 key areas, specifically, especially around your leadership in terms of C-suite, the representation within your staff, and then your representation within your board as well. So we've scaled back on quite a few areas, but we continue to shape and form, but as well taking it mindful that, of course, things do change. And I think that's one of the brilliant thing about Pledge 2.0. It is very flexible in terms of the reporting styles that we do. So we can definitely work in terms of understanding what are some of the restrictions that you have as an organization as well in terms of reporting, and then build and craft a plan that would be able to address the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you for the question. I think a bigger part of the challenge that we have seen with data is that, one, people don't have the systems and they're not necessarily equipped to collect the data. The other piece that we have noticed around the issue with collecting data, and Kika spoke to it earlier, things will look worse before they get better. And so, it's a challenge to self-examine and to be self-critical, and that is a barrier. And so for us, the biggest hurdle has been, advocating, but also educating people around why the data is important to collect. Generally, you've seen this across the board, especially in the public sector, they collect a ton of data. If, my sister works for Census, and she's astonished at the type of data that we are able to collect and how much people are willing to actually give their data. Historically, Black communities have not been so open to getting their data collected. And so there's various ways to actually, create awareness around self-ID and what does it mean to actually disclose, but disclose in a manner that is anonymous and kept safe. And so for us, it's going to be a question of making sure people understand why the data is being collected, how it will be used, and how it will impact people positively. It's that's the outcome that we want to focus on. Unfortunately, it's proven to be really difficult. Now, the bright side of all this is that people who continue to fill out our pulse surveys every year do it willingly. So we don't necessarily have the issue with our signatories providing their data. I think now it's making sure that the data that we're collecting is impactful, that we're collecting the right data, that people understand why it's being collected, what's going to happen with it. And so there's a lot of awareness building around data. But you're right. I mean, it's very different in Canada than it is in the US. But what we're hoping with this new process is actually establishing those benchmarks. That's the point, right? We can't deal with what we don't know. Is there a question online?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this comes from Candice. Signing a pledge 5 years ago was an important first step, but renewing it requires a different kind of leadership. In your view, what does truly courageous CEO accountability look like for this next phase? Perhaps a question to Dahabo or Kike. Thank you, Candace.
So, the reality is that being a leader in this space today, honestly, is a choice. I think in 2020 it was very much a collective choice, but this is going to be really individual to leaders, and it's not necessarily specific to CEOs, but anyone who's working in this space has a leadership role to play, and you'll be making an individual voluntary choice as opposed to a push coming from a revolution being televised, honestly, right? And so it's disheartening when we see that the impacts of this work are always done post-traumatic moment, as opposed to a willingness that comes from action and from an individual perspective. And the CEO pledge was exactly that. It was individuals taking a very personal position on the issue and making sure that they had a role to play as opposed to the collective role. And so I think courageous leadership looks like continuing to do the work, even if everything around you tells you otherwise.
I don't have a lot to add on that. Just to say, I think that the leader of the future, like if we really coin this phrase future focused leaders, and we just outlined what Canada is going to look like, this idea of who our talent pool is in Canada is real. This is a real issue. And so, rather than sort of lose all of the potential talent and sort of possibilities of all of Canada's population in 10 to 15 years, this is going to be directly connected to successful outcomes for Canadian corporations. And so, I mean, just to piggyback on Dahabo's point, a leader is a leader is a leader, right? So the one leadership quality is usually the ability to step out away from the crowd and step out in front of the crowd. And so, we're looking for that. And I think as often as we can find ways to sort of champion those types of leaders. I mean, this is there's a piece about all of this, and we've talked about this a little bit, Dahabo, recently, you and I, is just the almost the PR on the future focused leader, and really sort of creating a sort of a new en vogue sort of wave around those folks. And they exist. I mean, yeah, they exist. They're all around us. And so we need to kind of be louder about them in public.
First of all, I know this has been in development for a while, so really exciting that we hit today of Pledge 2.0. Love the sense of accountability and measurement as you continue forward. How did you connect with your current signatories as you develop this to get feedback and to get to this point?
So I don't know if everyone knows how the first pledge came about. And I don't know if everyone online does know the story behind that as well. But it was a few individuals coming together from different sectors and different industries back in 2020 and having a very honest and raw conversation about what's working and what's not working. That conversation was held between our chairman, Wes Hall, and very many other leaders in corporate Canada around, tell me the truth. Like, this is a closed space. Tell me the truth. What's happening? What are you feeling? What's not working? How can we help you? What does that look like? We did the same thing with Pledge 2.0. We went out to very many organizations in different industries and different sectors to have that conversation. But this time, the difference is we had 5 years of data and 5 years of experience and 5 years of lessons learned. And so the Pledge 2.0 is really built with very many organizations who continue to believe in this work, know that it is important, but wanted it to be better. I have my board member, Jennifer Bernard, who's the CEO and president of Sick Kids Foundation, always says to me, Dahabo, good, but better even if, right? Like, how do we make it better if we did this? And that's the kind of conversations we've had. I do want Dan to jump in because he, with our team, had very many conversations with signatories about what they were feeling and what they were experiencing and how we as an entity could help support that. And I'll let you jump in a moment, Dan, but I want everyone in the room and online to know something. Black North is a convener. We are an enabler. We are the gap, right? We are literally sitting in the gap with you. We're not on the outside. We're not on the peripheral. Our job is to connect you to the resources, to the tools, to the information, knowledge, data that allows you to do this work. We know it's difficult, but the conversations that we've been having with signatories has been exactly that. What more can we do? And this is what we've been hearing. We want to collect more data. We want to be able to identify where the issues are. We're not sure if what we're doing is actually working, right? And I'm sure you've all heard this, we have a laundry list of things that we're doing. And this is what I started with at the beginning of the conversation today, is how do you measure your efforts, not your success? We're not even there yet, okay? How do we measure if the efforts that we are putting into this work is actually having the proper outcome that we want to see? And so I'll let Dan jump in on some of the thoughts that he's heard as well through the conversations.
I was just you nailed it. I was going to hit that our design process was consultative throughout the entire thing. So I think it was a good 6 months of us first understanding pain points, what's working, what's not, et cetera, from a number of signatories that we interviewed one-on-one, and not just the ones that were most active. We explicitly said, like, let's talk to a breadth, right? So we can understand not just the ones that are opting in, you know, in the most way, to understand pain points. Then we brought all of our design choices to them, said, what if we did this way, that way, all those pieces. And then we've also dry run the survey through everybody, a good chunk of them, to chat and say, is this data easy to find? Is this burdensome or not, et cetera? So end to end, from strategy approach down to the tactics, we socialized with a good number of signatories throughout.
So I know there's a few questions in the room, but I have one question here in online. I apologize. Go ahead. Yes.
Oh, yes, sorry. I'll keep mine quick. It ties back to the question actually on data. And I was just curious. I know this doesn't apply to everybody because it relates to the Employment Equity Act, which, you know, if you're federally regulated, then it comes into play. But my curiosity ties back to the 2023 task force, which had recommended adding Black workers to the list of designated groups in this federal legislation. And a lot of us have been kind of waiting eagerly for a bill to finally pass so that organizations that are federally regulated are, accountable when it comes to Black representation and a whole slew of KPIs pertaining to Black workers. I was just curious if BNI I know this might be outside the purview of what BNI does, but I'm genuinely curious sort of if that's something that you folks have tabs on, or that you I don't know if this is something that you see as an integral component of kind of, you know, the way forward, because a lot of organizations would kind of start to put that effort if this were passed.
It's such an incredible question. And I do just want to give homage to all the Black pioneers at Del Black. There's so many who have been pushing for the Employment Equity Act to be updated after 30 years of having 30 years. And so, you know, I think we were Black North, we were part of some of the consultations when that was being tabled. It is unfortunate that it is still not real. It's one of those recommendations that make sense and is absolutely crucial. But we can thank our lovely government for the machinery that they function in is extremely slow. And so for us, we don't need to wait for an act. We don't need to wait for legislation. You know, a lot of times, and I think I've said this many times over the past 5 years, we don't need to be forced to do the right thing. Right. And so we all, in all of our systems, no matter what industry or sector that you're in, you have flexibility to collect data. You may not be able to collect it in the way that you want to collect it to keep up with the privacy laws. So we know that, but you are able to collect data. And so our ask is we don't need to wait for that. It may take another 3 years, right? It's been a long time. And so I hear you. But the reality is that that system functions naturally in a very slow manner. And so it's not necessary for us to wait for that. We have the research. We know what the categories should look like. We know what the representation is in Canada for Black communities and other communities that are growing significantly, especially new immigrants. And so we should be collecting data right now. So give me a sec, Ryan. I know there's a few questions online, and then we'll come back in the room.
So we have two questions from Monica. So maybe I'll just start with one and then we can move to the next one. So the first question from Monica: is there a plan for aggregated shareback of the data that we submitted for the final survey for Pledge 1.0?
So, well, this is my cue to or plug for those of you that did not complete your survey for the 5th year to please do so. But we will be publishing a 5-year report closer to the fall this year. Very many individuals and companies have responded, and we're waiting for a few more that needed a bit more time and things of that sort. And so we will be releasing a report for the 5-year.
And the second question is, what are the facilitated opportunities in Pledge 2.0 that BNI will have for signatories to connect with each other along with BNI?
I love the question. Again, I'm just going to refer back to my conversation with the Deloitte team this morning. One of the biggest things that I wanted everyone in the room and online to take away from this conversation is that there is a hunger that signatories have to connect with each other, to connect with BlackNorth, to connect with information, to connect with what's working, what's not working, and our commitment, and I can promise you that we will be organizing more and more sessions like these so that you are able to talk to each other. We host peer-to-peer sessions online every single month. We've had over 250 signatories who've participated in those. And they are some of the most liveliest conversations. They're extremely private and confidential because signatories come into those spaces with real day-to-day issues and learn from each other, share best practices, but also are able to take away information and evidence into their organizations to say, well, I've heard this company doing this and it's really working. I'd like us to try that here. That was actually part of the pledge, right? Sharing best practices. And so we commit to organizing more and more sessions. The incredible feedback that we received from last year's summit was astonishing. It received more feedback, okay, wait for it, than the gala. Okay, and I think the gala's a hoot. And so the fact that people really loved coming together and hearing from industry experts as well as each other, I think that was an incredible opportunity for us to learn and to create more of those spaces like we are today. And so we commit to doing that. Thank you for the question. So is there a question in the room, and we'll go back online after?
Sure. And this is truly amazing. And I just want to commend BlackNorth for what they're working on. And ACBN, we're looking forward to becoming a member. And I'd love to advocate for the other Black entrepreneur ecosystem members to also become members. So I was curious if you could walk through what it would look like for other organizations to partner with BlackNorth so that we can spread the word on the pledge.
And so if, Shelton, if you can bring up that slide with the 4 options. And just so you all know, for everybody online and in the room, we strategize around the Q&A period. I was supposed to have like 4 people on stage, but somehow I'm taking all the questions. So I'm going to invite my colleagues, Kika and Dan, back up here. Share the wealth of the response. No, they're not coming up. Okay. And so these are, look, I'm going to be really honest, okay? What we wanted to do here was to create a path, various paths, right? You may not be, we've heard from signatories saying, we report on this already. We do it through other means. Our job is not to make it laborious for you. That's not our goal. Our goal is to ensure that you have the resources that you need and the tools that you need. But if you are already reporting, then share that data with us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? A lot of you have said that to us. There are others who are not reporting, but would like to report. This is when you come in as a reporting signatory. And I'll be honest, right? We went back and forth around the cost of this. And Shelton alluded to it a little bit. You know, the thinking behind not setting up BlackNorth as a membership style organization from the get-go was, one, we were drinking from the fire hose. There was we were in the middle of COVID. The world was burning in very many ways. Black communities across the world were on the streets, right? I was on the streets. We were sad and we were angry. Our point was not to figure out a way And I do feel like I'm among signatory family, so I will be honest, our goal was not to make it more difficult. Our goal was to ensure that Black North now became a point of reference, not a point of cost. We wanted to build credibility, we wanted to build track record, we wanted you to get to know us, and we wanted to get to know you. One of the biggest questions I've been asked over the years is, how do you build a framework for 500 signatories? They're all from different levels of government, different institutions, sectors, industries, different, way of reporting. How do you do that? This is what that looks like now. There is a path for all organizations and companies and, signatories to support this work, whether you are building your baseline, you want us to support you with your self-assessment. And we have incredible partners, and they've all told me not to say their names, but I'm going to say them because it's not a sales pitch, but I want you to know who you have in your corner. You've got folks at Deloitte, you've got Bain, you've got MJY, there's so many of our partners who would be more than happy to help you with that. If you're non-reporting and you have the data, you want to share that with us, perfection, right? Now we're able to support you with how do we recognize your work. I've heard this many times, people saying we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, but no one knows about it. Storytelling is such a big part of success, and it's such a big part of sustainable success. And being a donor or program sponsor for us is so critical because not only do we do the systemic work internally with signatories, we help support and empower communities. Shelton spoke to that, right? 67 homes this year, brand new homes, home ownership, building generational impact. You can't measure that. Trust me, I've tried. You can't measure that at all, right? Whether it's the over $2 million in scholarships that we give out every year. There's so many things that you cannot measure, but that we need your support on, because as much as you're building your internal community, it's equally important to build the external community, because that's the community that's coming into your systems by 2041. Those are the young people that need to be developed, that need to be supported, that need to be empowered. And being a donor means you pay for my salary. No, I'm kidding. Being a donor, that was a good joke, I think. Being a donor means you support the organization, the institution, what we do. A lot of times, there's been so many data reports on this, but there was a report done by the Foundation for Black Communities that 7 cents per $100 goes to Black-led, Black-serving organizations. It's next to nothing. And capacity building money almost never exists. And that's the honest truth, right? We get tons of opportunities for grants and things like that, so to help support, develop a program, but nobody thinks about the resources and the structures that are going to be developing that. Everyone wants to do $1 million donation for a scholarship, but no one thinks about who's building the scholarship, who's doing the outreach, who's going to the high schools. No one thinks about those things, right? So capacity building is absolutely critical, right? And again, we stand in the gap. And so we have given you what we hope is a multitude of paths to do the work that is important when it comes to equity. Hopefully that answers your question, Ryan. Okay. Yes, give me a sec, Angela. I think there's one question online.
So this question comes from Amanda. How is our data secured when submitted to BNI? What protocols or practices do you have in place?
See how I don't know? I can't answer that question. It's not that I don't know the answer. We do absolutely have a framework for data privacy, but my technology human is right here.
Thank you, and great question. So in terms of data, I think one of the most important things is, especially with where we are, space and time, is there's a lot of hacking that's going on. So the biggest thing that we've taken is we follow all the I would say data security policies that we do have in Canada and on Ontario, and as well as in Montreal. And as well as we have regulations in terms of who has access to that data on our team as well. So we limit it to, I think, 4 people, which are part of the pledge team. And then as well, in terms of the data as well, we will be stripping all the identifiers that would identify where or which organization the data is coming from as well, so that, God forbid, there is a hack, none of the information basically would be able to be tied back to a specific organization. So that is part of the policy that we've going to be releasing, I would say, within the next month or so. But we definitely want to ensure that all the data that is being submitted is safeguarded. And as I said, we'll continue to just report on the aggregated data going forward.
Angela, you had a question?
Yeah. So thank you for today. This was incredible. Notwithstanding the responsibility of everyone in this room to share this information within their organizations, what is Black North, or does Black North, or maybe you've already done this, have plans to give a CEO update of Pledge 2?
Yes, we will be giving a CEO update. So, I want to answer this very carefully, only because I know the people who are responsible, but I know the people who are doing the work are two completely different people, right? The people in the room and the people online are the people that are doing the actual work on a day-to-day. The reality is we needed your buy-in first, because you all are the practice piece to the work. You're not looking at it from the perspective of, is this the right thing? I am not selling you something that you haven't already bought or have already understood that it's critical. But for us, the first approach was always to talk to the people internally to every organization, because we know that you're going to be able to tell us, is this feasible? Does this work? How will this happen? Our next goal is speak to all of your leaders. There are very many CEOs that are online, actually. But our goal is to organize a session only for those that sign the pledge. So they're not all CEOs, depending on what sector or industry that they're in. But the goal is to have that level set conversation as well. It will be brought up again at the summit on November 2nd. If you haven't registered for that, I hope that you do. But it was a strategy for us to have the conversation with all of you first, because we know that you are the most active when it comes to this pledge, and you are technically the pledge owners in practice and not in vision or principle. Are there questions online? No more? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'm just grabbing my speaking points, but I think a big part of the conversation, this was such an incredible conversation. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for those of you that attended online. I know that, I know this work isn't easy. Trust that I know that. A big part of the question for us was making sure that you knew that you weren't alone in this work. Everyone that's sitting to your right, to your left, everyone that is online with you is experiencing the same thing when it comes to this work. Some of you are well ahead, others are just starting out, but all of you are in it, right? And for us, creating this sense of community was absolutely crucial to this work. And so I do want to say thank you, right? It's not easy to be in this room 6 years later. And you continue to do that. And anyone that tells me that people have walked away, I always look at the signatories in our network that continue to do this work. And so this started for us in 2020, and like Kika said, there's so many of you that's been doing this before 2020, and we'll do it long after 2025. And so I do want to thank you for being the building blocks and doing the work of equity. I also want to thank Kika and Dan and Shelton for their incredible presentations today. I have the honor of working with these individuals and very many of you in this room. And I'm very, very hopeful for the future. I also want to thank our hosts at Deloitte, Victoria, Naya, Emma, and Brendan. There's other leaders who are in this room who believe in this work as equally or more than we do. And it's incredible to see that it's incredible to see the people that understand why this is so important, even in a moment like this. And so if there's anything I want you to take away from today, and everything, the journey that we've traveled through, all of the presentations that you've heard today, is that, there is a commitment that needs to continue to be made, right? This is not a one-time commitment. I was asked the question, do people need to re-sign the pledge? You absolutely do not need to re-sign the pledge. The pledge is a continuous commitment of this work. No one said that the work of eradicating systemic anti-Black racism or eradicating barriers was going to take 5 years. If that's what you heard at any point in time from anyone, they did not tell you the truth. This work it needs to be sustained. And even though we know there's very many organizations that are stepping back, I'm proud to see the organizations that are not, and understand that we have an advantage when it comes to our talent, when it comes to our country, when it comes to the humans that live in this country. There's so much that we can do together. And so this is not where the conversation ends. This is really the launch. I saw a few of you taking pictures of the presentation. Know that we will be sending this presentation to all of you. You will be getting an onboarding kit from all of us as well with respect to what the next steps look like. We are really excited to have those conversations. There's very many things that are going to happen over the next course of a few weeks and a few months. And, you know, I think you've heard it a couple of times, demographics are going to change. I'm excited for that. You know, sometimes when I tell my niece and nephews that I'm doing the work of equity, they look at me really strangely and say, well, why can't just everyone treat each other fairly? And I think the next generations coming after us will do a much better job than any one of us has done. But we do have to set the plate for them. We do have to set the table for them. And it's an honor, I think, to be a part of that work. And so thank you to all of you, those of you online, those of you in the room. It's been at least my greatest pleasure to be a part of this work. So thank you so much.